Hello, class, and welcome to Chapter 6 about the major ecosystems of the world. And this will finish up our Module 1 material. So we'll go over Earth's major biomes. We'll look at freshwater, aquatic ecosystems, estuaries, and marine ecosystems. So how do wildfires connect to ecosystems? A wildfire is an unexpected fire in the grass, the shrub, or the forests, usually when the understory needs to dry for prolonged periods of time during the dry season. Many plants need or have adapted to fire, and some seeds need fire to actually sprout. Fire is important in ecosystems because it actually cleans out the understory and all that dry material. And it also can alter the wildlife regime of changing forests. Earth has many climates and characteristics that organisms have adapted to, forming biomes. And a biome specifically is a large, relatively distinct terrestrial region with a similar climate, soil, plants, and animals, regardless of where it occurs in the world. And there are 9 major biomes throughout the Earth, and the location is primarily determined by the temperature, which can vary with both latitude and elevation, as well as precipitation. So here's the distribution of the 9 terrestrial biomes, and we will go over these 9, and you can kind of see that they can be found throughout the world. So as we kind of describe these 9 biomes, we have a wet and a dry side, we have a cold side and a hot side, and you can see how where every biome kind of falls. The tundra is the cold Arctic, the boreal forest is high altitudes, still pretty cool. From left to right, we have more wet, where we get tropical rainforests, and the hot, temperate deciduous forests that lose their leaves. And then as we go to the right, we have decreasing precipitation. So we get into the savanna, the moist tropical desert, and the dry tropical desert. So this is kind of how we group these biomes based on latitude, temperature, and precipitation. So let's go over these 9 now. The tundra is the Arctic or the alpine tundra. It's a treeless biome in the far north with very harsh, cold winters and extremely short summers. Precipitation is about 10 to 25 centimeters per year. And temperature, because it's so cold, there's a very short growing season. So the growing season is about 50 to 160 days. In the tundra, the nutrient-poor soils with little organic material cause a permafrost present where there's low species richness. Vegetation is mostly grasses and sedges. There's just a very simple food web with very low primary productivity. The boreal forests is a region of coniferous forests in the northern half of the tundra. It covers about 11% of land, and the growing season is slightly longer, with precipitation a little bit more too, about 50 centimeters per year. In the boreal forest, soils are acidic and mineral poor. There's a patchy permafrosts, and vegetation is comprised of drought-resistant conifers like the white spruce, the balsam fir, and the eastern larch. And there's mostly only small animals and migrating birds, with a few large animals present, like the caribou and moose. The temperate rainforest, then, this is a coniferous biome with cooler weather, dense fog, and high precipitation. An example of this is the Northwest US, so think Seattle, Washington. Precipitation is very high. The heaviest is in winter, and temperatures are pretty nice. The winters are mild and the summers are cool. The temperate rainforest, the soils are nutrient poor, but high in organic material from all the dropped needles, and the cool temperature slows down decomposition. The dominant vegetation are very large evergreen trees, so it gives it a very old growth forest. Species richness. Heavily logged, and when logged, it's replanted as a monoculture, so it does not undergo succession to old growth harvest. And these trees are harvested in 40 to 100-year cycles, and there are many endangered species living in these older growths. Temperate deciduous forest. This is a forest biome that occurs in temperate areas with a moderate amount of precipitation. The temperature has seasons where you have hot summers and cold winters. The topsoil is very rich in organic material and underlain by clay, and the vegetation is primarily deciduous with oak, maple, and beech trees. Animals, we have deer, bear, small animals. And most of the biome has been regenerated after farming and timber harvest. Grasslands have very hot summers, cold winters, and too little precipitation to actually support trees. So it's just pretty much grasses. There's tall grass prairies, short grass prairies, and about 90% of this biome has been lost to farmland. The soil has a very thick organic material with a rich organic horizon. Periodic fires will prevent tree and shrub growth, and animals once covered with bison, but now no longer. So there's smaller animals present in this biome, like prairie dogs. The chaparral is also called the Mediterranean climate. For example, like the Southern California, where we are in Greece, the temperature is mild, moist winters, hot, dry summers with frequent fires. The soil is thin, not super fertile, and the vegetation is dense growth with evergreen shrubs. It's very lush during the growing season, and animals are primarily mule deer, chipmunks, and many species of birds. A little bit about EnviroNews. There's about 6,000 wildfires each year in California, as we know, and goats, as a means to fight wildfires, they actually will eat up the extra brush. About 350 eat an acre of brush per day, and as a part of this plan, goats can be a tool for forest and property protection. Deserts, then, is the biome where there's a lack of precipitation, so it limits plant growth. The temperature can vary very highly, so it can be very hot and then very cold with very low precipitation. Soils are low in nutrients, high in salts. The vegetation is sparse, so you'll see a cactus and sagebrush plants, and animals are very small to help regulate their temperature. The savanna, then, is a tropical grassland with widely scattered trees. The temperature varies little throughout the year, and the precipitation, there are seasons that are regulated by precipitation, so like a wet and dry season, but not actually temperature. The soil is low in nutrients due to leaching, and the vegetation, you have a wide expanse of grass and occasionally an acacia tree, which have fire adaptive characteristics. And animals are mainly herds of hoofed animals and large predators like lions and hyenas. The tropical rainforest, then, is the lush, species-rich biome that occurs where climate is warm and moist throughout the year, very high precipitation, very productive, and it's the most species-rich biome out of the 9. There's ancient, weathered, nutrient-poor soil. The nutrients get tied up in vegetation, not the soil. The vegetation is 3 distinct canopy layers of the trees, and animals, the most abundant are insects, reptiles, and amphibians. Vertical zonation is increasing in elevation that has similar effects on the ecosystem as traveling to higher latitudes. So this just means that as you go up in elevation, the biomes will change. Aquatic ecosystem, the fundamental division is freshwater versus dissolved oxygen levels, light penetration, pH, and the presence and absence of currents. And there's 3 main ecological categories of organisms: plankton free floating, phytoplankton, which I'll use photosynthesis, zooplankton, which are more animal-like, nekton, which are strong swimming, and then benthos, which are bottom dwelling. Freshwater ecosystems include rivers and streams, which can be classified as lotic or flowing, lakes and ponds, which can be classified as lentic or standing, and marshes and swamps, which are always standing water. And freshwater ecosystems represent 2% of the Earth's surface, and they assist in recycling water back to the oceans. Rivers and streams, we have headwater streams, which lead down into larger streams, and rivers, which eventually lead to estuaries, deltas, and the coastal ocean. The physical nature of aquatic ecosystems changes significantly depending on where they are. This idea of a river continuum concept, water always moves from the headwaters where the river forms to the coastal ocean, and it will change in physical features and food sources through abiotic differences, and it will result in the change in biological features and ecosystem function. In streams, organisms are adapted to fast-flowing water, like hooks, suctions, flattened bodies, and in rivers, it's adapted for swimming, so it's more streamlined. The body of fresh water that does not flow are 3 zones: littoral, limnictic, and profundal. and they experience thermal stratification depending on the depth. And this is a look at those three zones shown here. So the littoral zone is the shallow water area along the shore. The limnictic zone is the open water beyond that littoral zone. And the profundal zone is beneath the limnictic zone of especially deep lakes. Thermal stratification, so temperature changes sharply with depth in water. The thermocline is the temperature transition between warmer surface water and colder water at depth, and the difference is in density, and it's only present in warm months. Fall turnover shows how the temperature of lakes will change during the fall. So here we have summer, the thermocline layer, then fall turnover, the entire length becomes between 3 to 10 degrees Celsius. Winter, we have ice and 4 degrees Celsius, and in the spring turnover warms back up again. Marshes in swamp, this is land with shallow fresh water for at least part of the year. It's very characteristic of soil and vegetation. They were once regularly filled, but more recently ecosystem services have been better recognized to help with flood protection, water filtering, and etc. Protection of ecosystem organism surfaces is very important for endangered animals and so forth. For example, the Everglades, the original extent of the Everglades spanned all the way are where fresh water and salt water mix. Estuaries have a highly variable environment with temperature, salinity, depth of light penetration, but they're highly productive. The nutrient is transported from the land, tidal action circulates these nutrients, and there's a high level of light that penetrates shallow water so that plants provide this photosynthetic carpet. Salt marshes are usually in temperate estuaries. They're shallow wetlands that are dominated by a few species of salt-tolerant grasses. They were once seen as worthless, filled in, and constructed over, but the services are extensive. Salt marshes help to buffer land from storm energy, like in the Superstorm Sandy situation. There's a large cycling of organic matter for the coast, and it's a very huge habitat for birds. Mangrove forests are the tropical equivalent of salt marshes, and they should cover about 70% of coastlines. They also help to buffer against storm energy. They save lives, and they're nurseries for fish and other organisms. Marine ecosystems are subdivided into life zones, the intertidal, benthic, and pelagic environment, whether it's the neritic or oceanic province. And here we have kind of a division here of these marine ecosystems that we will go over now. The intertidal zone is the area of the shoreline between low and high tide. It's a biologically productive habitat. It's a stressful habitat with splash, wave, flooding, and drying out. The benthic zone is the ocean floor extending from the tidal zone to the deep sea trenches. The sediment is mostly mud. There's burrowing worms and clams, and there's 3 zones depending on the depth of that benthic zone. Protected benthic communities, we have seagrass beds provide food and habitat, kelp forests with a very large biodiversity found off the shore of rocky coasts, coral reefs, which are essential fish habitats in the ocean, built up from the accumulated layers of calcium carbonate. We have colonies of millions of tiny coral animals living in coral reefs, which are similar to upside-down jellyfish. They're found in shallow, warm water, and they are the most diverse of all marine environments. Here we have a picture of a seagrass bed on the left and a kelp forest on the right. There's 3 types of coral reefs: the fringing reef directly attached to the continent, where there's no lagoon, the atoll reef, a circular reef in a lagoon, and then barrier reefs, which separates the lagoon from the ocean. Human impact on coral reefs, we have sedimentation from clear cutting, coastal construction. We have overfishing, destructive fishing, coral bleaching, which causes stress. The mining of corals as building materials, runoff and sewage pollution affect coral reefs, and then ocean acidification and rising sea temperatures. And then the pelagic environment is all the open ocean water. The main divisions are based on depth and light penetration. The euphotic zone is the surface to about 150 meters in depth, And this is sufficient light for photosynthesis. So all the organisms are all floaters or swimmers in this zone. The Neritic province all the organisms are still floaters or swimmers like zooplankton and whales. And this is the water that overlies the continental shelf to a depth of 200 meters deep. And then the oceanic province is water that overlies depths greater than 200 meters. Organisms here will be filter feeders, scavengers, predators. There's no light for photosynthesis, so organisms are adapted for darkness. Marine snow are the food particles falling from the euphotic zone to help support some of the life here. And hydrothermal vents will support communities in deep ocean, which will support life too. Here are national marine sanctuaries. These are protected areas in the world's oceans, the NOAA administrators in the United States, and there's no take and other restrictions for use. So these are national marine sanctuaries, as you see here. Human impacts on the ocean. You can see pollution, invasive species, overfishing, point source pollution from cruise ships, aquaculture, bycatches, coastal development, habitat, and climate change can all have an impact on the ocean. Thank you for listening to Chapter 6, and we will see you guys for our next module.